Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Mr. Boyer.
Honorable Mayor Ron Shaver.
Here.
Councilmember Dan Marlar.
Here.
Christine Casteau.
Here.
Allison Howe.
Here.
Clint Anderson.
Here.
Lisa Northrup.
Here.
And Kevin Lindell.
Here. First on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the October 18th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read and approve those? Are there any corrections or revisions that need to be made? If not, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution accepting the minutes from the October 18th regular City Council meeting.
Second.
I have a resolution by Christine Casteau and a second by Dan Marlar. Vote by roll call.
That resolution passes unanimously.
Next, we have the swearing in of Police Officer Christopher Sandoval. Chief Crone. Do solemnly swear that I will support and protect and defend the Constitution and government of the United States of America and the Constitution and government of the state of Colorado against all enemies, whether domestic or foreign, and that I will bear true faith, allegiance, and loyalty to the same, any ordinance, resolution, or law of any state notwithstanding, and that I will well and faithfully perform all the duties of officer of police that I am about to enter and which I have duly appointed under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Take it easy there, Jared.
Christopher Sandoval comes from Thornton. He recently graduated the academy.
In the mic, Jared. Excuse me, Jared. Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Christopher Sandoval comes from Thornton. He recently graduated the academy. He's just a few credits shy of getting his associate's degree in, I believe, police sciences or whatever, something similar to that, criminal justice. He's getting ready to actually move to Fort Morgan here within later on this month, and just whenever you see him out and about, please welcome him. Thanks. You want to say anything? Okay.
No, thank you.
Next on the agenda is a recognition and retirement of Morgan Community College President, Dr. Carrie Hart. Mr. Miller.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Quick background, I wanted to bring Dr. Hart here to recognize him for some of his Glenn Miller work, and in the midst of preparing this, discovered he would be retiring, so I figured I'd save him a second trip, and we'll highlight both achievements at the same time. One of the first times I had encountered Dr. Hart was when I arrived in the city as Community Service Director 4 years ago at our Community Fort meetings, and we get the pleasure of meeting once a month and as stakeholders in this community, highlighting everything our organizations do. And through that, have been able to see a lot of his work come to fruition. The first was the band shell, and his work as a committee member on the Setting the Stage campaign and committee. The second of which was his tireless work on the Glenn Miller documentary. For those of you that haven't seen it, I would recommend it. But when I moved here, I didn't know who Glenn Miller was. There's likely, hopefully I'm not alone, but with his Glenn Miller work, I now know more about our local history and ties to not only Glenn, but just the music-rich environment and community that still exists today. I believe that piece of work will live on, obviously, past Dr. Hart's tenure and something we can celebrate for years to come. So thank him for that and what that'll do for our community from a recognition perspective. And then finally, as we all know him, he's president of MCC, and I envy the work he's been able to achieve there at the college. The awards that are given on an annual basis recognizing his work and his staff's work, the impact that has locally on our education system, workforce development, the positive light that's brought to our local area, county. Obviously, MCC has a greater reach than just here in Fort Morgan, which is also impressive. So I wanted to bring him here tonight to say thanks, recognize the work that he has done in our community, and we have a little token of appreciation to give him as well, so he'll never forget us. So I don't know if anybody else has.
Well, as part of the community, I've had the pleasure of working with him, with Dr. Hart on a few committees, economic development and such, and it's been a pleasure working with you. I understand you'll be around for a little while longer, but your accomplishments and things that you've done for this community are greatly appreciated. Because I told you earlier, my parents came out to see the screening of your documentary and were very, very impressed with it. So I thank you for all the work and things that you've done for the community, as well as the college, which is a huge asset to our community. You'll be hard to replace.
Well, thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members and city staff, and Josh. Thank you very much. I'm very humbled by this recognition, and I want to let you know that nothing happens in isolation. It's really teamwork. You know, we've got excellent faculty, staff, and administration at MCC that I have really enjoyed working with. They're the ones who have really made the college a great college, and I appreciate, you know, knowing that you recognize the recognitions that we've received at MCC, because the college has been on the national map. But it's really partnerships, and we greatly value the partnership that we have with the city. The references to Glenn Miller that Josh made, those all have city support. And I think, you know, back in 2009 when we formed the MCC Jazz Ensemble, we would have called it a Glenn Miller Orchestra, but there was a copyright issue. And as you know, that CD is all Glenn Miller. It's been the Chamber of Commerce and Morgan County Economic Development are using that to promote Fort Morgan. That has the city of Fort Morgan's name on it because you were a key supporter of that project. The city has been a key supporter of the documentary that we just did on Glenn Miller. And by the way, that documentary, it's been a huge ordeal to get that thing done, and a lot of it has been licensing, permissions, legal obstacles that we've had. We're on the last obstacle that we can blow that over with the feather. It will be broadcast on PBS. I'm not sure when, but we're working right now on a contract with Colorado Public Television, so it should be hopefully broadcast sometime this fall. Our producer, Eden Lane, who is the owner of Sleeping Dog Media. Once she knows what revisions need to be made for PBS, we'll do that for a DVD. We'll be pressing the DVDs for the donors for that project. The city will receive one. It's a permanent gift for the Fort Morgan Museum. I know there's already a place at the museum to show that in the Glenn Miller Theater. So Glenn Miller will live on in perpetuity, and I can't tell you how grateful Johnny Miller, Glenn Miller's daughter, is for what the city of Fort Morgan has done to make sure that her father's music lives in perpetuity. And so, again, nothing could be done in isolation. I'll always be grateful for the city of Fort Morgan for the support that you've given me personally, and as well as the college. And you know, it's always with mixed feelings when you reach that retirement age. Most of you don't know about that yet, but I'm experiencing it for the first time. And you know, there's no greater honor. I started out in 1974 as a substitute music teacher in Denver. And for me to retire as the president of one of the best colleges in the United States is an unimaginable honor for me. And MCC is great. I mentioned the faculty, staff, and administration, but it's the partnerships that we have in the community. And it's not only been the college, but this is the best community that I've lived in, and I've lived in a number of different communities. And so Fort Morgan will always hold a special place in my heart, as will MCC. And I'm very grateful for this recognition, and I'm very humbled by it as well. So thank you.
And it's a big gift.
That's cool. Yeah, turn on for a good photo for Jenny. There you go. That's gorgeous.
And I'm very honored for this license plate. Now, this is very special. I'm actually overwhelmed. So thank you very much, and Josh, thank you.
Yeah. This was an idea
Thank
that
you.
the Glenn Miller Committee had discussed this year in renaming Beaver Street for the festival as Glenn Miller Avenue, and with Brad's support and JW, we were able to get the sign and have it framed for Dr. Hart, and there's a plaque here that highlights and thanks him for his service in our community. So it's got a City of Fort Morgan Street sign and Glenn Miller at that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council members, and City staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation and possible action on a resolution on the appointment of Abigail Patterson to the Library Advisory Board. Councilmember Casteau.
Well, on the Library Advisory Board, we have several openings, and we received a application from Abigail Patterson, and at this time, I would like to request that we accept that application.
Second?
Offer a resolution that we accept that application.
And then I can second that.
I have a resolution by Christine Casteau and a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carried unanimously.
Somebody contact her.
She's right here. Wave Abby.
Oh, there you
right
are.
over here.
Okay. Welcome aboard. Next on the agenda is a public hearing on an application from Les and Heidi Linker for a variance to allow a two-family dwelling in a R1 zoning and allow on-street parking in lieu of a required off-street parking. The council will be acting in its capacity as a zoning board of appeals for this hearing. This is a public hearing. Keep the public comments to the issue before the council. Each speaker is asked to limit comments to 3 minutes unless a speaker is representing a group of citizens, in which event additional time may be allotted. Please respect these limitations. I reserve the right to limit public comment to that is inappropriate and under these guidelines or otherwise improper. I also reserve the right to limit testimony or questioning that is repetitive, cumulative, argumentative, or not pertinent to the issues. and to set a time limit on the duration of testimony if I deem it necessary in light of the number of people that have signed up to testify. First, we have the issue of the legal notices. Mr. Brennan, has there
Yes.
been properly, have they been properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, legal notice of this public hearing appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on October 11th.
Next is a presentation of the application by Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As mentioned in the request, this is a request to allow for a two-family dwelling within an R1 zoning, which currently predominantly only allows for single-family residents. The property is located at the corner of 7th Avenue and Warner Street, up on the overhead. It's in the center of your screen right here. It's also shown in the exhibits in your packet. Property was purchased as a single-family home in approximately April, May, earlier this year. Property size is 7,800 square feet and generally proportionate to other lots in the area. R1 zoning requires a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet in our code. Additionally, buildings in the area range in footprint and total area, as you can see on the exhibit. We've provided a little bit of background as far as what also is in the area of R1 zoning, utilizing county assessor's records as well as some of our own. Following was found to exist within the R1 zoning: Trinity Lutheran Church as a use by right, which is right here. They also own this vacant property here. Horizon Manor Townhomes is owned as a PUD. That's right next to it. Right here, now those are individual lots, so by definition, they actually fall under the R1 zoning, but they are listed as a PUD, which is a separate zone. There's a multifamily unit directly to the east of that next door. Platte Valley Baptist Church is also a use by right, and it's all the way down here. And then there's Green Acres Elementary. I think we all know where that is. I'll just zoom up a little bit. Such surrounding areas generally occupied by traditional single-family residential homes, including there's also single-family homes within the R2 and R3 zoning districts. That was provided in Exhibit B. Along US 34 and Platte, that's predominantly B1, but that allows for a mix of anywhere from single-family, two-family, all the way up to business uses. Most of this area in this is R1, off to the west is R2, and then as we get progressively more intense from 34, we go from business to R3, but even a lot of these homes down in here, even though they're allowed to be multifamily, they're still built as single-family homes. Staff had to provide an analytical review of the request. Doesn't appear to be any significant health, traffic, or safety issues related to the request. And as referenced by the applicant, it's evident that additional housing options should be made available to the city. We were happy that they referenced our new comp plan. That's a good thing. As well as they did mention that there is a need for current and future mix of housing types, but also contained within those goals also talks about protecting and enhancing the stability of Fort Morgan's existing neighborhoods. As it applies to the code, land use code, the potential issues related to the R1 zoning, in addition to on-street parking versus off-street parking, the following regulations apply. Section 20-4-10, subsection 3, the purpose of R1 low-intensity residential district is to identify and zone land predominantly for single-family use. That's the definition. That's a simple applicant proposes a two-family dwelling use. The other sections, 20-4-90, that just references the table of permitted uses, showing single-family is all that is allowed as far as dwellings are concerned in R1 zoning. Section 20-670, as it relates to parking, talks about single-family, two-family homes require 2 spaces per dwelling unit. They currently have room for, as it acts now, they have a driveway and a garage here. If it was to go to two-family, it would then require 4 spaces. The applicants requested for on-street parking in lieu of adding additional room for 2 more spaces on the property, which would include a curb cut. Section 20-670, F, when the intensity of a use of any building, structure, or premise shall be increased through the addition of dwelling units, floor areas, beds, seating capacity, or otherwise is required, shall be provided for such an increased use. Again, that relates to parking, and because this is an additional dwelling unit, it would require by code an increase of 2 spaces. Through analysis, the process and criteria for the variance, it's outlined in your packet. Briefly summarize the review criteria. The applicant of any variance carries the burden of proving that the granting of the variance or appeal is justified by reasons which are substantial, serious, and compelling, and must be prepared to satisfy to the board to the extent possible the following criteria are met. Owing to exceptional circumstances, literal enforcement would result in unnecessary hardship. Specific conditions in detail are unique to the land and do not exist on other land in the same zone. Manner in which strict application of the provisions would deprive applicant of a reasonable use of the land. Unique conditions and circumstances are not the result of actions of the applicant taken before the adoption of the regulation. Granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare, or alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Applicant cannot derive reasonable use of the property without this variance, and the variance will not be injurious to the adjacent properties. Again, in your packet is the evidence showing the application from the applicant and other support information that they provided. Included the layout of the house on the property, which you can also see here. They also provided exhibit of what their intentions were interior to the building, which would be subject to building code requirements. We've also provided the zoning map, as we referenced, how the surrounding area and the assessed uses play out. Also Morgan County's property record card, identifying them as the owner, as well as other criteria related to the property. Exhibit D is the affidavit of publication, including the postcard notification, 300-foot radius map. At the time of the memorandum was prepared, there was 3 public comments that were received. One was via email in your packet in opposition. One, we received a phone call with no opinion. And then we also received a hand-delivered note that was in opposition. Based off of our analytical review, staff finds there's not substantial, serious, or compelling evidence for council to approve this case related to the zoning of Chapter 20, Article 4 of the code to allow for R1 zoning. I do have an additional option for council should they determine that there is evidence to approve the zoning variance. Staff would recommend the following conditions be applied. Notification to the assessor's office of the change of classification from single family to 2-family. The unit for the second family be constructed, renovated to meet or exceed adopted residential building codes. The new address for the second unit would be determined by city staff for the property owner to coordinate with the postal service, county assessors, et cetera. The applicable public utilities be installed as required for 2-family dwellings. This predominantly relates to gas and electric, and that also that the on-street parking would be approved as requested. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have from what I've presented or what may be in your packet.
This is just going to be converted to a duplex, or is there actually 3 different, are they utilizing the basement area?
Well, the basement would be utilized, and the applicant can speak to that, but if that was to be converted as a separate dwelling, then that would form a multifamily use. But what they're proposing is the first floor and the bottom floor would be 1 dwelling, and then the northeast corner here would be separated entirely, so it'd have a separate entrance, those kind of things. It's approximately 500 square feet, would be treated as the second dwelling.
So if we, if this were approved, would the approval or the change in zoning allow for later on the applicant to change the basement into a third dwelling? Or would the zoning, would they have to come back with another zoning requirement?
This request is only for two-family. Again, in this case, just from, as staff sees it, as far as a variance and a hardship, it meets the general requirements. R1, as stated, is intended to be more open, larger lots, flexibility, greater separation. Typically, we would recommend that if this house or the neighborhood wants to have a little bit more options for their basements as second dwellings, they should probably get together and rezone it to R2. It's kind of a unique case and a unique application, but if they wanted to do something to the basement, we'd look at it again. But again, then we're getting well beyond, and again, making sure, and Jason will probably lend to that, lending to the circumstances of the variance on why we would allow it. And so that's staff's position, is we don't see it as a hardship issue. It's functioned as a single family. It's comparable to the rest of the neighborhood, and those kind of things. So I think if it was to move to even be even a more intense use, again, you know, we still wouldn't recommend it as a variance application.
And just so that's clear for council, a variance is an exception to the code. We're not changing any zoning for this property, so everything still applies as is. If council does approve a variance, they get an exception to that rule. That lasts so long as the property exists in its state. So once they, presuming it was passed, they make the renovations. If there was any additional alterations, or if there was a, you know, heaven forbid, a fire that burnt the whole place down, that variance would be gone. It runs with this particular property. So additional units wouldn't be allowed under the current variance. It's very limited, and it doesn't change the zoning at all.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for?
I do, about, on the formal objection, the ones that did not want this, did they give any reason?
The one that was in the email,
I'm seeing no reason.
that was just, they objected, and that was it, as well as the note. They can kind of go as far on and as they want. I do know the one that had no opinion. I believe he's in the audience, so I don't know if he's going to speak more one way or the other during the public comment period. So, but that was about as far as they got. We just got the email and left it at that. And the other one, we got a note, so we don't have any formalities to it. So.
Okay.
So you're not seeing any reason to approve this?
Not as far as it falls within the requirements of the variance. You know, again, there's other avenues. You know, if they went and tried to rezone the property as R2, then it'd be a use by right. But again, sometimes spot zoning isn't recommended, even though you can see up to the north, the PUD that's in there. That's kind of a situation. We just, again, I think the intent is, as we talked about in the comp plan too, is to protect existing areas where they develop and they build in an area with a certain impression of what they want their neighborhood to feel like. This area here, and I think further down south of town, are some of the cases where we do have R1 zoning, which are really intended for single-family uses. So for us, it's in the general size requirements, even though, you know, if we go out a little bit further, these properties right here are awfully really big and large. These three homes. What's kind of interesting in this, if I may, is if you look at how the lots are platted. When this subdivision was originally created, there was these three lots, and then there was actually two lots. One went here and one went here. So there was five. Now, what has happened over time, look at the legal description of this property, and actually these It's actually carved out as a portion of those original lots. So it's changed hands and size. Nowadays, it would have to go through a replat process, like a minor subdivision or maybe a major subdivision instead of part of this lot and then this lot, those kind of things. But surveying and those nature.
Pretty dissimilar to what's directly across the street from it, which is still R1.
Yep, yep. Yeah, R1 exists up to the alley on this side, but then it carries several blocks as you go to the east.
Off-street parking. Would there be a ability to widen their driveway to accommodate additional parking to eliminate
Yeah.
some of the off-street parking?
Yeah, there's several we didn't really get into with the application standpoint. If you wanted to change that condition that they did provide off-street, we would recommend that you have staff work with the applicant. Whether we widen just here, because it's near this, or whether they pick another area over here. I know in some of this area on this side where this house is, this frontage here to the right of way is only
meet
17
setbacks.
feet. That doesn't meet our minimum 18
Setbacks.
feet. On top of that, it doesn't meet our current setback requirements for front yard, which is 25 feet. So again, did not get into additional issues over there. We would probably have them expand a little bit further on the north.
That's where I was thinking.
Or even one spot, just making it a little bit wider.
Wider.
In our parking code that we adopted late last year, those were some of those revisions that for a single car garage, you can do up to 20 foot wide. So again, if you had two vehicles, which is what most people do anyways, you have the garage that counts as one, and then you could, in theory, put two more out there on the driveways. So a single car garage is a use by right, they can go up to 20 feet. Yep.
If there is an approval, you have those 5 recommendations that go with it. Is it
Yes,
one
sir.
of them separate utilities?
Yeah, as required by tariffs and all those other fun things, and Brent can come up and interrupt me if I'm off. But typically, as Jason had lended, when you get into two-family and unrelated families, it becomes more of a public safety issue. And so again, you don't want to have unrelated people living upstairs, downstairs, because if someone is only under ultimate control, in the winter it becomes a problem. If someone leaves and it's vacant and they get their electric cut off, and then it affects the other family that's in there. Additionally, when we have fires and emergencies, those kind of things, and sometimes when everyone's in a frantic and you think everyone's out, you know, the other family's not worried about an unrelated family in another portion of the home. So a lot of those criteria come into play. Now, by our water requirements in the code and sewer, only one water tap and meter and one sewer is allowed per lot. So that kind of falls in line with the 40-unit housing we did. It's only got one water meter to it. But all the other units have its own gas and its own electric, predominantly intended for heat and maintaining their own internal environment. So that would have to be accounted for. And then again, if it's another dwelling unit, then we'd have to deal with addressing, which we're actually finding more and more cases when people are requesting addresses through the post office. We've got a good relationship with them now that we've worked on for several years, that we're finding out sometimes unintentionally people are asking for addresses to garages and things like that may be sometimes be thought of maybe getting turned into a living quarters, which isn't allowed. So we're able to be on top of that. That's why we want to make sure that if it is approved, that all those things are accounted for and done right.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for?
Was there, in the packet, I think maybe in the letter, I think there was a comment about the electricity, the utilities already being divided on the property? Am I misremembering? What was that about?
They're separate There's separate control boxes in there, but again, separate metered, there's not.
Okay.
And so again, a lot of the interiors of the house as it relates to building code issues, we don't control that. So how they partition off and segregate that, the electric department just provides that initial meter, and then however they want to subdivide it, whether it's, 220 to this end of the house and 110 somewhere else, that's not within our control. So the request is some of that's already there, that they're not going to have to do significant renovations.
But separate electric and gas utilities.
Yeah, gas would be optional, as you know. We see that on renovations, as long as it provides heat. Sometimes when we see renovations in an R2 zoning, and they want to convert a basement to a second dwelling, we find out if the furnace is in the basement, we just have them keep that and in control. And then upstairs, they do electric heat, because that's easier to just segregate the two versus, or if the furnace is upstairs with the thermostat up there, then they cut off to the lower level, and then they just come in with electric heat beneath instead of having two gas. But some houses are all electric, some choose to use gas for heat. So this may be, as they get into it, a combination of the two, or just all electric.
Okay. Anybody else? Next, we'll hear comments from the applicant if they have any or wish to speak. Would you sign in, Les, please?
Les Linker, reside at 204 South Sherman. Bought this place, I think, in March. It was built in 1955. Nothing's really been done to the property since it was built. It needs a lot of repair. Originally, the house, what I'm suggesting is a one-bedroom apartment to the north, because the house was originally built that way. It has a separate electrical panel for just that section. It has separate heating and air conditioning that was originally built into that section of the house. It has a separate sewer lines coming out. I don't know how they tie in once they get it further out. They do have separate sewer lines leaving the property. So originally 55, it's got a separate kitchen already built into the location. So we're really not remodeling or renovating this to something new. This is actually existing in the house. And I don't know if it was ever looked at. I know the last owner used that area for his business. I think he had a photography business at that time when he was younger, and ran his home-based business out of it. I think the reason I'm not asking for off-street parking is I think it takes away of the appeal of the house in the neighborhood. I mean, this is a beautiful neighborhood. I was really happy to get this house because of the neighborhood. It's upper middle class. All the homes are really nice and maintained over there. And I wanted to bring this house back to help improve that area. I've done this several times with my business and other properties. We buy the cheapest thing out there, and then we make it, beautiful. And that's my goal to do with this property. Economics plays into factor. With the separate income I will get from the one-bedroom apartment, that allows me to put more money into it, more aesthetics, more curb appeal, landscaping and stuff like that. Without getting the variance, it leaves it a single family. It's still going to be a rental no matter what. But then I cannot put as much money into the property because the money ain't coming back out. So it's going to probably stay more in the condition the house was originally did when I got it. So I'm trying to make this better for the neighborhood. And the other problem I think that could go on is if it is single-family, somebody's going to use that as a home-based business. I think as far as traffic issue, that's going to be more of an impact to that area than being just two families. And I'm not really, the single-family apartment, I think, is more engineered for probably, I'm thinking more of a retired widow or widower or something. I thought it was go ahead and furnish it, see if that is something that maybe one of the businesses or maybe the hospital, for pool nurses, that they could rent it out for the year, and then I have a completely furnished room where they can move people in and out. A single person. I think it's more of a single person than a couple type living space.
Okay. So the main portion of the house in the basement, as Brad said, is going to be the main
That's the
rental or
Yeah,
living.
This thing's 4,000 square feet.
Yeah, that's a
huge.
pretty good size house. And you think there's a separate sewer there already?
Yes, I mean, it doesn't look like it's, without digging it up, I can't be for sure. But the sewer system on the main house is further to the south and then angles back through the house, kind of almost like a 45-degree angle to pick up the kitchen and then out to the, behind the house. And the one on the one bedroom has, the ducting looks different. So I don't know if it's been replaced, but I can't see how it comes out. But I know when I talked to the neighbor to the north, he indicated to me that they thought that we're all on the same sewer line. So I'm thinking all three probably tag into the same sewer line and go out to the city. Now, and the gas also is, has a separate line into that area, even though they're running 1 meter. The first line comes off, goes directly into the main house, and then the other line runs all the way down to the end of the house and comes into it. So I have no problem putting 2 meters. It's gonna be real simple to do. And the back of the house to the west, that was an addition done back in 78, I think, 76, 78. They had added on, I think it was 14 feet. It's on the thing. And they did a full basement underneath. The upper floor plus the garage was all put on at that time. So I don't know if it ever had a separate utility box before they did the addition, but at the time they did the addition, they switched it to one electrical box. But the power, from what we found, both main powers out of the boxes, separate boxes for the main house and this one bedroom, go to the same, they added in a third box, 200 amp box, and would probably have to separate it at that point.
Does this does this house have any backyard, or is it fenced?
It's all side yard. The backyard's only about 7 feet.
That's what it looks like.
And the side, it's all side yard. And it's weird the way they cookie cuttered this, because my side yard actually covers up neighbor's front of his house and garage area.
So the yard he's talking about is right
Here.
So where is the front door to this house? Off that sidewalk?
Right at that sidewalk. And
So isn't that part in the back, the backyard? I guess the big open space,
that would actually be, go ahead.
Actually, it's a corner lot, so it falls under different definitions of fronts
oh,
and
okay,
sides and-
right, okay. Looks like a backyard.
Also, the way the house was designed, you come in through the front door, you go into a landing or foyer, and then you have a door to the left that enters into the main house, and then you have a door to the right that goes into the one bedroom. So it's already been separated. The section in the yellow would be what we're proposing to do as the one-bedroom apartment.
Okay.
So nothing on the exterior will be, it will still look like,
Nothing will change on the exterior.
well, you'll clean it up. You're wanting to do work to it, but you're not going to be building anything
No,
on
we're not-
that.
We're not expanding or changing anything on the
And there's not any fire regulations with it being two separate dwellings? I mean, like, you know, between a house and a garage, there have to be separate firewalls. Is that something that's a,
It does, and that's what we're working on before that gets completely closed. Those are some of those elements that we talked about to make sure on here, the garage is directly to the left of the screen. That's where that is, so north is still up when we saw the aerial. So one wall would be up against the garage, but to create those separations of dwelling units, those would be things that would be modified to make sure that they're.
I was speaking more to, because I'm assuming that there's not a firewall between not between the garage and the house, but between the bedroom or the one-bedroom apartment, for lack of a better word, and the rest of the house. Does there need to be any separation there from a fire code perspective?
That's what some of the modifications would have to make that a standalone. So as Les had mentioned, with the foyer, there would be a direct access. It would only be here to this area. There wouldn't be any other allowable access to here from anywhere else in the primary building or the primary dwelling. So those are the modifications to make this as a standalone unit altogether. So some of that, you know, if there's any penetrations, doing some extra wall work, having that separate exterior door, those kind of things that you wouldn't see otherwise, so, yeah.
Also address that between the one-bedroom apartment and the rest of the house, there's a stairwell. So you have a double sheetrock wall on the apartment side, you have the stairwell, you have another double wall sheetrock on the other side. So, and if we need to, you know, add another, switch to fire-rated sheetrock on any of the interior walls, that's not going to be an issue. Also, there is no basement underneath this apartment. The basement stays all to underneath the main house. Basically, just crawl space under it.
So other than any additional income from this single apartment, is there any other reason that would deprive you of any personal use of this property?
Basically, it just comes down to if it's going to be a single-family home, and I rent it that way, or we get the extra income off the, and right now, we're probably looking $550, $600, depending on how we, what kind of fixtures we put into it and dress it up. That's huge on, you know, what you can put back into the property. You know, it's $6,000 a year over 10 years, that's $60,000. So that allows me to go out and, you know, do some exterior work as far as painting it, re-landscaping it, bringing this up.
And is it currently, per the picture, it appears as though there is already a kitchen in place?
Yes, there's already a kitchen.
So if the variance were not to be granted, would we expect them to take that out, even though it's, I'll just stop there and let you answer that question.
No, we don't. When it goes back to, this falls under the International Residential Code. Essentially, when you look at the current adopted International Residential Code, the parameters are pretty straightforward that, let's just say, someone wanted to, on this property, make the most minimal size house possible. The occupied sleeping quarter has to be a minimum of 120 square feet. And then other space, which could be kitchen and bathroom and all those other things, has to be 70 square feet. So that's the minimum. Beyond that, as long as it meets all the plumbing criteria and electrical, they could have a kitchenette inside of every bedroom if they wanted to.
Okay.
It doesn't matter, and that's why he said, you know, it's probably changed over the years and different things. Home business, home occupations are generally allowed in any zoning district because it's minimal customer usage. It's just for people to occupy. You've seen those in certain cases. And so, yeah, there's nothing limited as far as what they can put in those, as long as that first, at least one of those has that 120 square feet, which they've got plenty that are over that. So.
Okay, thank you.
I did go out and talk with some of the neighbors, and he actually stopped in the shop and talked to me for a little bit. But there was real concerns from the neighbors, even one to the south of me. They didn't want a rental property next door, and that's the bottom line. They didn't like, they talked about one that was down the street that was a rental for a while, and the problems they were having with the people who were renting it and stuff of that nature. And they just didn't want to see that go on, and it's going to happen.
I was going to say, if you own it, how's it get?
It's going to happen, and it comes down to questioning what kind of place do we want this to be. And I like to, like I said, I'd like to do an upper middle class type place. That's what I do. I've got several other rental properties. I try to attract a better clientele. They don't destroy your house. They pay on time. It's a lot easier job than the other options.
Yeah, well, as I said, that argument is, it's going to be a rental regardless if it's stays as is or for that, I guess, but it's your property, so.
I know we do have a home-based business right next door to it too. And one of the things that talking with Kirkendall was doing the driveway actually to the south in the fence area, the backyard, because there is enough setback at that point. He was concerned about doing it there because that's where their customers kind of park in that area. Like I said, I think it takes away from the neighborhood. There's 130 square feet on the front of the house, and then all the way down 7th Avenue, there's no houses facing that direction. I mean, so you got that whole block that's able to park off street.
Yeah, because on Sunday morning, that's usually pretty full.
During church, yes. And like I said, my goal is not to do a couples type place. I'm looking for, if I rent it for an individual. And maybe that's a possibility where we put just one parking space in next to the one there, and it really doesn't change the aesthetics. It would look more normal than doing another double parking spot.
Will there be access, well, I guess maybe you don't know this. Will there be access for the person that's the tenant? They will not be able to access their portion of the home via the garage, correct? They
Correct,
would have
yes.
to go around up the sidewalk and into the house.
It could be actually split either way. You could actually have the garage for the one bedroom. No, you can't. No, there will be separation between the garage and the one bedroom.
Okay.
Like I said, and having the ability to rent it separately gives me a little more control on what's going on in the house. Because once you put a renter in there, then they start doing whatever they, especially the way it's set up. I think this is the better scenario.
Anybody else have any questions or comments, concerns?
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Les. Next, we'll hear from public comments. If there's anyone that wishes to speak on this, would you come forward and sign in, please?
She's like, can't you bring the mic to me?
I know some of you. I'm Connie Christensen, and I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to ask a few questions. Number one, who gets custody of the garage? The renter upstairs or in the big part of the house?
Sounds like the
big
person
part
from
of
the
the
big part of the house, and that's completely up to the landowner.
But it faces the side street. And the front door faces Warner Street. And the children play around that corner traditionally. We'll have to watch that. I own a house north of that intersection, and I have an adult handicapped daughter living in that, and she's very friendly with the kids and stuff. That's not the issue, but she's concerned that the kids play there so much in the street. And the traffic, if they're going to be parking on the street, both on the 7th Avenue and the Warner Street, I'm concerned. We'll have to just tell the kids, find a different place to play, I guess, but that could be handled. But did anybody think about trying to get a little bit of the property to the west of? Because people that live upstairs have to come in way on the north side.
Ms. Christensen, can you speak into the?
Oh. Microphones. There's an outside door right beside the garage doors. Where does it go?
Into the garage.
You've taken the diagram down.
It goes right into the
So
garage.
it's an exit from the garage? I know, I just have questions. So if I could ever find Les.
Well, you can direct them to us, and we'll ask him.
Okay. Yes, I just, because I have an interest in it. I'm not here to make problems. I'm here to avoid them.
Okay, well, you
Okay.
can address us. We can get your answers from Mr. or Mrs. Linker and that, so.
Listen,
We have to make this decision this evening, though, so.
you have to make the decision right now?
Well, that's what we're here for and why it's scheduled on the agenda, yeah.
I'm worried about cars parked on the street. That's all right.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on the issue? Would you like to clarify the questions, Mr. Linker, that she had, or just for the record?
The garage does have a walkout door, so you don't have to open the garage door to get to the driveway or to the dumpster. It does enter into the main house of the larger part of the house. It is going to be separate from the one-bedroom apartment. And the one-bedroom apartment, both properties are accessed from the front door. No, they both access out the front door. They can go out that door, dump trash and stuff, but their main entrance of the house, as you come in on the sidewalk up to the front of the house, the main door, you walk into a foyer. There's a entry door to the left for the main house, and then there's an entry door on the right into the one-bedroom apartment, so it's separated out. Like I say, come on over, I'll give you the full tour, you'll love it.
Okay.
What was the other question?
I had asked if we ever tried to get more land.
And no, I have not talked to Mrs. Moore at all on that. Yeah, and that's a possibility. It actually crossed my mind.
I don't know how that whole got away without.
And actually, I've been in talking with Mr. Sagal that's to the south of me since my, getting on zoning and variances and all that, zoning laws and stuff, is maybe he was wanting to purchase part of the side yard. Because it does overlay his property and garage. And he would like maybe pull back 5 feet so he's not backing up right against that fence. So that's another option we're going to be looking at.
Okay.
Can you explore those options before they have to make a hard pass move? Get an alley all the way down.
Now,
I love an alley.
yeah.
I'm with her.
I'll let Brad address that, but I don't think that's going to happen the way the lots are laid out.
So to answer your question, those are great questions. But the issue for the variance at hand is a two-family and an R1 zoning. So it's silent on making the lot bigger. It's still R1. So even if he purchases everything to the south and the east and land swaps and all that, it's still in an R1 zoning.
Look at the size of the houses to the north.
Fully agree. So the issue for the variance is those are all options they could look at. That would be a separate process of replatting. But we're looking at the allowance of putting 2 families in an area that should only have 1 family. But those are all things he can look at down the road, whether this is approved or not, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
You bet.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this issue? Mr. Benham? Seeing none, I would ask the city clerk if there's any oral or written comments submitted to the clerk's office prior to the hearing.
Not through my office, Your Honor.
All we have is the ones that
The ones that were
received.
included in the packet
Put in
and
the
the
packet.
folks here this evening.
One of them was not for or against, or had no decision.
Correct. It was as we were reporting the phone calls that we got, just asked some questions of what it was for. And
So was the other one he was referring to didn't want a rental in the area? Or do
you know, he could have talked to every neighbor, but the fact that nothing went through our offices, this is all we received through our offices, through verbal or email or otherwise.
Okay. We'll proceed to the council discussion. Are there any questions from council or any discussion of the council on this?
I think it's a really unique property, as far as since they have that apartment that was already created and part of the plan. I also think that the intentions of the linkers are to maintain the area, and if we added that separate off-street parking, it would definitely change how it looked, and I think that would, that's one of the big concerns. As far as safety goes, I thought about that as well. But then when I learned that it was just for like a single person, I thought, oh, there won't be like 4 extra cars on the street. It'll be 1. So, yeah, I'm thinking I'm definitely in favor of the variance just because I think it's a great idea to have nice single housing for a young professional who just needs like a nice space. And it's extremely difficult for professionals in the area who don't have families yet to find a nice rental. So I think it's a good option.
That's awesome. Any other comments? I know there are some other exceptions in the area, but on the other hand, it doesn't appear that there's any real being deprived of the use of the property. So I guess it comes down to, is the variance a necessity, or how council feels as a whole?
And typically we go through the legal process after the public hearing is over, and we can go over what the legal requirements are. that council needs to use to make the decision. So right now, we're during the public comment and public hearing portion of it, but certainly I can answer those questions when we're done with that part.
So is adding on to the parking, adding a parking spot, is that an option? Or is that something you don't want to invest more money into a rental property that?
As I said earlier, I think a compromise might be adding one spot next to the existing parking. You know, I hate to change the aesthetics of the neighborhood and putting big wide parking stall in. I think it's going to look ugly. 2 parking stalls is pretty general throughout the community. So maybe we could go ahead and just put 1 parking stall next to the existing driveway, making it a double driveway. I think it'll look fine. I don't think it'll be massive. And like I said, my goal is to maintain a single person in there. I don't want couples. So that would take care of the 1-car issue. You know, and if they have 2 cars, then they're going to do off-street parking anyhow. But I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Also, I forgot to mention, 1 block away from us, there is duplexes and quadplexes in that area. Just to the south of us, 1 block, the next block. And then we put up a duplex, new duplex, Alec.
Oh,
right. And then just around that corner from there is a triplex. So there are other units that were set up. Different zone, I know in one of them for sure. I don't know about the triplex. I think the triplex is still going on.
So like we discussed earlier, it's a term of art. Townhomes, even though they're connected with the 0 setback, they each are on their own property. So they each have their own utilities, water, sewer, so forth. It's not the duplex. Okay, because there's a firewall they're created separately. So again, that's when we talk about that PUD, there's actually 4 individual lots there. So in theory, they're all individual residential single family. Okay. 2 family or 2 dwelling, again, if they're there, according to the tax assessors, this was the point of this map, they may exist, but it doesn't mean that they're there legally or properly reported with the tax assessors department. Okay, sometimes those happen by accident. So those areas in red identify those that per the tax assessor's records are not classified as single family. So again, school, church property, church property, church property, all a use by right. Okay? This is all R2 over here, but that's the only property that's not a single family residence. Okay? Similarly, this is all R1, and this was one of the duplexes he's talking about, and then here's another one that got a little bit bigger. Now R3, even a more intense use. Again, the bulk of those, by definition through the tax assessors, are single family. The ones that are highlighted are not. This little one right here in B1, right next to this is O'Reilly's, this is CarQuest, so we all know that yellow house. That's a single family dwelling that's a use by right in B1. So again, there's a lot of, even though we have the more intense zonings, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they have to build. So as you progress into the zonings, as our code used to be back in the day, if you did, let's just say B1, everything else beneath it was allowable. That changed years ago because we wanted to have some preservation of what people had, that otherwise you might as well just zone the whole city B2 and then everyone do whatever they want. And that's why some of that changed, that it's no longer in that cumulative nature. So.
Not at the moment, but.
That would make it easier.
Are there any other questions before we get to the legal part?
Brad, I think answered this, but I just need some clarification. If this doesn't happen, the variance doesn't fly, whatever, is there another process? Is there another way to propose it or go about it?
Rezone to R2 or R3 or anything that would allow a two-family or higher. But again, it's a spot zone, but they've happened in the past, working with neighbors and stuff like that. That's what we run into. I think it kind of goes back to when we see zoning in other applications. An applicant can come in with intentions of a business, let's say, but sometimes unfortunate circumstances happen and they sell the property. They're allowed anything that's allowed within that zoning criteria. So even though someone may, as an extreme, not to use this one, but in B1, someone may think, hey, I want to rezone it B1 because I want to put a commercial business, but then they may change their mind and find it's more economically feasible to build a single-family house. Well, nothing would come to you because both are a use by right, and then all of a sudden a single-family house gets built. Conversely, someone could say, I'm doing B1 to build single-family. Once it gets approved, then by a use by right, then they can go build a business. And so that's why we try and allow flexibility in our zoning, and that's why kind of looking at the surrounding area and those kind of things. So as far as this and staff's position, agree with everything that's been said. You won't see a whole lot of difference, but we go off of the letter and the intent of, single families, what's intended in the R1, whether we visually see it or not. So.
And also, if I might add, just to make sure it's clear, the intentions of the applicant aren't necessarily what's allowed. If it is allowed to be a separate dwelling unit, there is nothing the council can do to prohibit who lives there or what kind of family lives there, or if it is a young professional or an old professional or a married couple. All of those things are outside of the purview of the council. So making sure when you make the decision, you're doing it to the use of the property, not specifically to any sort of promises that have been made. I don't have any reason to disbelieve, but I want to make sure council's aware that there may be a person that moves in and it's one person who owns 5 cars. We can't prohibit that person from living there. Can't prohibit that person from living elsewhere either. But just be aware that the situation that's presented today may not be actually what happens. And that's legally allowed should council provide that.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
It's going to be a rental as long as they own it. So, I mean, that's the way it's going to be unless they decide at some point sell it. But regardless of where it's at, it's going to be a rental property because that's the reason they purchased it. So it sounds to me that it's been used to that extent in the past already. So I don't know. Is there any other comments or by council or thoughts, discussion?
I just think with the kitchen and all that already in there, that's probably what it was used for and just not legally used for that. And I think they're trying to go the legal route, and I think that's pretty commendable. But
Okay. There's no other further questions or discussion by council. I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Your Honor, I'd offer a motion to close the public hearing.
Second. I have a motion by Christine Casteau, a second by Kevin Lindell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Board of Appeals action, Mr. Myers.
All right, so
Some
just
legal advice?
to clarify, as far as the public hearing portion is going, that was for the receipt of evidence. That portion is closed. If council feels that you need additional evidence, you can reopen the public hearing and ask additional questions of staff or of the applicant or anybody else here. As far as the legal requirements for the action, you always have the option of doing nothing. You can always continue this hearing to a later date if you feel you need additional information, etc. What effect that has on the applicant, I don't know. You can approve the variance as presented. You can approve with the conditions as presented or a combination thereof, or you can deny the application. When you're looking at the criteria, what council must consider under Section 20-3-150 under the Appeals and Variances Code is that, and I'll briefly review that again, so we're making sure what standard is being applied. The applicant has the burden of proving that granting the variance is justified by reasons that are substantial, serious, and compelling, and must be prepared to satisfy to the board, to the extent applicable, the following criteria are met. Other words of saying that is, all of the following must be true unless they don't apply at all. And those 7 criteria are listed. Owing to exceptional circumstance, literal enforcement of the provision of this chapter would result in unnecessary hardship. Specific conditions in detail which are unique to the applicant's land and do not exist on other land in the same zone. The manner in which strict application of the provisions or regulation would deprive the applicant of a reasonable use of the land in a manner equivalent to the use permitted to other landowners in the same zone. Unique conditions or circumstances are not the result of the action of the applicant taken subsequent to the adoption of the regulation from which relief is requested. Granting the variance will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare and will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The applicant cannot derive a reasonable use of the property without a variance. The variance will not be injurious to adjacent properties or improvements. So those are the legal standards that must exist in order for the council to vote yes to allow a variance. That said, when council, whomever wants to make a motion, the way these mechanical processes work, please make findings on the record as to those specific criteria one way or the other if you found that they have been met or you found that they have not been met based on the evidence, and then a motion to approve, deny, continue, or a combination thereof. Questions?
Yes. Of course. So, did I understand you correctly, that 1 through 7 all have to be met?
To the extent that they're applicable. And it's
Can I ask specifically about one of them, or we have to go back onto a?
certainly, and at this point, we're not receiving any additional evidence, so
Okay.
it's not a part of the public hearing.
So, number 3, the manner in which the strict, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's saying that it cannot be used, basically, one of those is saying that if without the variance, they cannot utilize this property.
As if everybody else in the same zoning.
Correct.
A good example of that would be in previous applications that have come before council, a specific lot size is not technically legal, so they can't use it to build anything. A variance would allow them to build on a lot that's technically too small. Or if the tables were different and they were looking at building this house, we'd mentioned the setback isn't quite met by 1 foot. That could be a variance to say you're allowed to build the house even though technically setback's not made, so that they can use the property.
But the fact that it is a single-family dwelling currently and can continue to be used as a single-family dwelling, we have not injured them by not doing the variance.
Correct.
So thereby, does that not insinuate that that condition is not met?
Well, I won't make the findings, but certainly, that's the legal requirements that council needs to make sure that you're aware of and vet that process through on the record to make sure it's clear why you're making the decision and whether or not these criteria have been met. I don't want to answer the question because I'm not the fact finder. Politely. Are there any other questions for me?
Yeah, so you said we could do nothing, vote on it, or continue it?
Correct.
Okay, well, if we continued it, what would that mean?
If you wanted to continue to have additional information provided at another public hearing, if you're not satisfied with the information and you want the applicant to have an opportunity to provide additional information, you could have an additional public hearing at a later time.
But not an additional hearing for what would probably be for a rezoning, correct? That would have to be a completely new
That would be a separate
ballgame.
process.
And that would be different criteria that would have to be met at that point?
Correct. A separate legal standard. You know, if city council wanted additional legal advice, you could continue this. I could prepare a confidential memo going over the implications, both sides of this issue, and provide that to council so that you have that information before making a decision. Those might be some reasons you'd want to continue it. If you want to proceed tonight, you certainly, that's your prerogative.
So you did say they need to meet all 7 criteria.
To the extent they're applicable.
Applicable.
There are some variances that come before council that have nothing to do with public health, safety, and welfare, for example.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a resolution or action.
Well, nobody wants to touch this. So we want some more legal, the ramifications on both sides. I guess we would need a continuance.
I would agree.
Certainly.
And we can do this again.
This doesn't go through as additional public hearing. We've already heard all the public hearings. It's just
Basically, you'd
information
stay
from-
the action item till the next council meeting and bring it up again at that point.
In another public hearing?
If you'd like to.
Oh.
I don't know that you're required to.
Does that require a motion or a resolution?
Some sort of motion. Depends on what you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to continue the hearing to the next council meeting, it would be a motion. If you're wanting to make any sort of official action tonight, it would be a resolution.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we move it to the next hearing.
Second?
So that would be the 15th?
That's correct. There's a motion to continue it till the 15th by Christine Casto and second by Lisa Northrup. All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Aye. That carries, and it will go to the next meeting, and I guess you can give some legal
I'll provide counsel with a confidential
Memo,
attorney-client privilege memo on the ramifications,
Ramifications.
both sides, and how to, on these things. All right?
One thing, so we will have another public hearing then, or just discussion? Because what I was wondering is if the applicant could help us, because I think our hangup is you're saying we have to meet all of these 7 criteria and everything. So I was thinking if the applicant would directly address those to us, then that would be able to ease our mind as far as having met all those conditions.
I just think it's...
that's our, at least
That's
what
the
I
hangup.
gather, our hangup is we're given the task of making sure that these 7 criteria for appeals or variances are all met according to legal counsel, and I think that's where we're kind of getting a hangup. And so I thought if the applicant would address those specifically, it would help us with overcoming that hurdle of resistance and everything and hesitation, and maybe make that work better.
For me, it's not so much a hesitation as it is, I want to be very clear that if we move to approve this, that we're not doing that, and then there seems to be very one obvious area in which I think is holding, at least that's holding me up. about being able to, I mean, I don't know how, if all 7 of these have to be the criteria, I don't know how we can vote yes, because the house can be used as a single-family dwelling. It doesn't have to be split in order to function as a single-family dwelling, and that's why I would like some clarification as to what does that mean exactly.
Jason, I'm not sure, but I believe the council, if you would be prepared to give them that legal advice at this time, I believe they could make a motion to go into executive session right now.
We could do that too. It's your preference.
Can't we just go through each one and have they met these criteria? Is it impacted? And
That's what you have to decide.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
let's do this.
Didn't we already make a motion to continue it? Do we have to undo our motion?
You haven't voted on that motion.
Yeah,
but-
we all lied.
Oh, you did?
vote
Okay.
on that motion.
Yeah, when we closed the public hearing and Jason began his comments, he said if you want to reopen the public hearing, you can do that. But I don't think that's what we're interested in doing. I think you're more interested in getting,
This is just a discussion between council, between the 7 points that seem to be the contention of being met. So that is what we do as council right here, right now.
Correct. And I can provide legal advice. I prefer not to do that in public as to kind of if you approve it and the criteria aren't met, what legal risks may that provide to the city? If you don't approve it, what legal risks might provide to the city, helping provide some how this applies, interpretation of the code, those types of things, I can certainly do
So
that.
do we have to notice an executive session?
no, not if it's called in the course of an agenda item and you decide that you need to go into an executive session is justified. No, you don't.
Okay, do we need to do it now, at this point? Can we finish some of the other items on here and can come back to this decision
You can do that.
just before our other executive session?
Great.
Is that possible?
Okay, so you'd be basically tabling this until the executive session and then have that executive session come back out and
Make a motion.
maybe make your decision.
Determination and
Okay. Does that work, Jason?
Yep. Jeff's going to be sad he missed such an exciting time.
What are you guys doing?
Supposedly watching.
We really want to test John. That's really
Hair
the
out.
point. We're trying to see,
Okay, so do we need a motion to go or just do the additional?
I think you
Item.
probably should make a motion to table this item until pending the legal advice in an executive session at the end of the
Can we make a
meeting.
motion if we think we should do it now?
Can do
Sorry.
that, too.
It's up to council. We've made the motion to table it till next week or next council meeting. That is on the table, been passed. If we want to rescind that, we can. It is council's decision at this point in time. We can address this as later on in an executive session or go to the second for the meeting on the 15th. That's,
I would like, I don't know, is it a motion to rescind? I would like to make a motion to rescind the previous motion to table this to the next meeting, and I would like to make a motion that we interrupt the current session and go into executive session for legal advice.
Second.
so you want, the motion is to go into executive session right now?
Yes, sir.
So that motion, just so we're clear, that motion was both to rescind the previous one and to go into executive session now.
Correct. Can I do that?
can we split that just so that we can rescind the first one and then table and then re-vote on the
Might be a
motion?
little cleaner.
Yes.
Okay, so I make a motion that we rescind the previous motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Lisa Northrup and a second by Allison Howe. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
And then I have a second motion that we go into executive session for legal advice.
Is that good?
What time frame? From
Now.
Okay.
As soon as possible. So as the applicant does not have to wait for the entirety of the council meeting.
Okay. Have a motion by Lisa and a second by Allison. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries by unanimous vote. Jason, are you prepared?
Of course.
Okay. We will adjourn for a moment and be right back. Okay. The time is 7:50. The executive session is concluded, and the participants in the executive session were Mayor Ron Shaver, council members Clint Anderson, Christine Costeau, Allison Howe, Kevin Lendl, Dan Marlar, Lisa Northrup, John Brennan, Jason Myers, and Brad Curtis. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Seeing none, I would ask that Councilmember Christine Costeau report on the executive session.
We were met in executive session for the purpose of legal advice on Section 20-3-150 on appeals and variances, and I move that we close the executive.
Okay. We are now back to the agenda item for acting as the Board of Appeals action. Receiving our legal advice from the city attorney, I would open this for discussion or entertain action on this item.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution denying case 16-020VA for less than Heidi Linker for a zoning variance from Chapter 20, Article 4 of the Fort Morgan Municipal Code to allow for a two-family dwelling in R1 based upon section number 6 under 20-3-150, where it states that the applicant cannot derive a reasonable use of the property without a variance. I would state that I believe that the property does indeed provide for them to have, it doesn't create a unreasonable use of the property.
Okay. I have a resolution by Lisa Northrup.
Second by me.
Second by Christine Costeau. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries on a vote of 5-2 with council members Lindell and Marlar opposing.
Sure.
Thank you for your time and consideration on this. I know it was a tough decision, and we'll move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Les.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Next on the agenda, we have presentation of possible action on a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract amendment for CRHDC Sol Naciente. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you. This resolution is to clean up some of the final paperwork with the development agreement with the CRHDC and Sol Naciente. Included in here are some changes that occurred during the development regarding sanitation services, completion of the final plat, and compensation for the half of Beaver Street for monies to go towards, once that construction begins, they'll pay us, which will go into a special account until such time Beaver's developed. Also, parks and open space, there was not any requirements, so we had to clarify that. And then the other item, did they get the amended copy?
Yes, they have the
They've
red
got the
line.
amended.
Related to storm drainage, as you know, the city's always looking for opportunities in storm drainage. They've got a nice big pond in conjunction with one that we did for Linda Street. So there were some amendments to continue to work with them
on ultimate potential city ownership of the ponds, as well as maintenance of the ponds on their standpoint, to help encourage that. So that would, as the recommendation state, that would be separate MOU, but it's to clarify some of those storm drainage requirements. So be happy to answer any questions you may have, or for Jason as well.
And so just so council's clear, we did have a table file that had a couple of last-minute adjustments from the folks over at CRHDC. I did review those, and I don't have any concerns with their change in language. So the version that staff would recommend you approve is the redlined version that's been provided in the table file.
So we're approving the one that was in our table file?
Correct. It more or less, it just changes the discussion on storm drainage. It reads almost the exact same. It's just formatted a little bit differently.
Okay. Is there any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign an amendment to the annexation and development agreement for the Fort Morgan Farms LLC annexation.
Second.
I have a motion, or a resolution by Lisa Northrup and second by Christine Costeau. Vote by roll call.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Next is a presentation and possible action regarding a resolution authorizing the application for a grant from the Great Outdoors Colorado. Mr. Miller.
Mayor, council, hello again.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Cubs are winning 7-1 in the fifth.
Good. Nice update.
I'm here for a resolution in regards to GoCo submittal, similar to what I was here for a couple meetings ago. This is a part of the mini grant for GoCo project as a whole. Cannot exceed $60,000. We've looked at and continue to explore some options over at Brenda Joy Park, one of which is a bike playground. Bike playground project will not exceed $60,000. We held a public meeting early last week, had 23 people in attendance for some design input on what that playground might look like. Designed really ages 2 to sort of 12. Beginner riders, not so much intermediate and advanced, although they could use it. And have some other ideas for what that property might become in the future. But for purposes of tonight, support of the submittal for the GoCo mini grant for a bike playground.
Is that going to encompass the entire park area, or is it going to take over the BMX
No, its
area
footprint's
portion?
about the size of the sand playground area.
Okay.
At the existing park. So would start to touch the surface for redevelopment, if you will, on what that BMX track could become. We've highlighted and are looking at what's called a transitional park option, which is kind of bikes, skate park, you need scooters, the list goes on, but a place where you and I could sit and eat a sandwich on these features because they look like benches and a little different than a skate park of yesteryears. So that's an option that we'll present to you in the future as well. And then there's some bike ramp concepts that could then encompass the remaining land. There's a stormwater pond over there, so we'd be mindful of that as we worked over there with Public Works and making sure we don't impede on that. But there's enough dirt and things to move around over there that we shouldn't create too many issues. Part of GoCo's grant requirement is an environmental assessment done by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We had that done by our local Morgan County rep, Todd Kozad, about 2 weeks ago. There's no impacts to the property in regards to their environmental assessment, which includes waterways, endangered species, so on and so forth. So no issues in their world, and pending your approval, we'll proceed.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Josh? Seeing none, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution for recreation grant from the State Board of Great Outdoors Colorado Trust for a bicycle playground for a mini grant from GOCO.
Second?
Have a resolution by Christine Costeau, a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Next, we have presentation and possible action on a resolution adopting the 2017 schedule of fees. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. We included in the packet a red-line version of the schedule of fees, which has been discussed several times during the budgeting process, most recently in September. The red-line version has not changed since that time, and it's presented for your approval by resolution.
Okay. Has everybody reviewed the schedule of fees? Are there any questions or?
Something I noticed, and I was wondering clarification and everything like that, on the way that they've changed the golf fees. We have a fee, and then you have a discount for being a resident, and a discount for being a senior citizen, and a discount for city wellness and everything. Are those additive, or you just get one or the other, or how's that work?
Kevin wants to add them all together.
Now that I'm becoming one of them senior citizens.
Sorry, Kevin.
It's a one or the other, and the way it's written as you see it isn't how it's presented to the public. So our rate sheet presented to the public is just the.
It'll just have the number.
Fee, senior green fee, employee green fee.
Okay, good, because I thought that was going to add to confusion and arguments.
No, publicly, they're not going to walk in and then disseminate what they're getting discounts for. It's just the way it had previously read was confusing to Ty, and this makes better sense to him and probably confused you. But how it will be presented to the public will look far different than you see it, but the rates will represent what you're approving tonight.
Okay, good, thank you.
He's the one that's got to, explain them, so we want him to understand them.
Any other clarification or?
No, now it's clear as mud.
Do you think you were going to get paid for golfing?
Well, it's entertainment for a lot of people to watch me.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution accepting the 2017 schedule of fees.
Second?
Can I amend that? It should be adopting, correct?
Correct.
Adopting the 2017 schedule of fees.
I have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Christine Costeau. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next, we have a second reading and a public hearing. So next on the agenda is public hearing, on ordinance number 1186, the 2017 budget ordinance adopting the budget, setting the mill levy, and appropriating monies to the various funds within the city of Fort Morgan. This is a public hearing. Please keep comments and the issues before City Council. Each speaker will be asked. This is pretty much the same as the previous public hearing, so.
Actually, it's a little different, so you should read
the whole thing? Okay. Each speaker is asked to limit their comment to 3 minutes unless the speaker represents a group of citizens, in which event additional time may be allotted. Please respect these limitations. I reserve the right to limit public comment that is inappropriate under these guidelines and otherwise improper. I also reserve the right to limit testimony or questioning that is repetitive, cumulative, argumentative, and not pertinent to the issue, and to set a limit on the duration of testimony if I determine it to be necessary in light of the number of people who have signed up to testify. Has the legal notice, Mr. Brennan, for the hearing been properly noticed?
Yes, Your Honor, a legal notice of this public hearing and the full text of the ordinance under consideration appeared in the Fort Morgan Times on October 20th.
Next is a presentation of the ordinance. Mrs. Kinney.
And as Jeannie comes up, I just want to point out, we did include the line item budget in the table files.
Yep.
It's the same as the the printed copies that you guys got at the last meeting, except for a slight revision to the revenues in the sewer fund that we discussed, because that, and Jeannie can explain more about that, but this is the document that underlies the ordinance, but the ordinance is basically just the big bottom line dollar amounts.
Okay. Ms. Kinney?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I started to come down here early because I was so excited to get to the fun part of the evening. No, I didn't mean of the whole evening, but this is pretty fun because it's all about numbers. But the ordinance, what we're asking is just, it's a resolution approving the 2017 budget, which includes the mill levy, which hasn't changed for many years, as I've been told, and appropriating the money into each of the different expense accounts. You guys have already seen the whole thing. We've already seen the budget many times over the course of the summer. We've looked at the budget, and you guys have offered, well, actually, originally, it was based on the goal set by the council in like February, so you're real familiar with it. The only thing we did change was what John said, and that's in the sewer department, we moved the revenue from being rate increase revenue to being taken out of the reserve, and it was like $101,000. And so that just switched. I left the bottom line is the same on it, and the bottom line for the budget. If you look at the last page, well, you probably don't have it in front of you, but the last page of the budget, 59,763, 781 matches. Yes. Love it when stuff matches. So did anyone have questions?
Job well done by you and your departments.
Job well done by the whole city. Everybody was involved in, all of the department managers essentially did their own budget. I just kind of glummed it all together.
Very good. Thank you.
It's like herding cats, though.
Next, we'll hear public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on the issue? Okay. Seeing none, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the issue? I will ask the clerk, were there any oral or written comments that were submitted to the clerk's office prior to this hearing?
No, Your Honor.
Comments by council. Does council have any comments on the budget? Seeing none. Is there any further discussion by council? I will entertain a motion to close or to continue the public hearing.
Your Honor, I would offer a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion by Christine Casteau, a second by Dan Marlar. Vote by roll call, or all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Council action, Mr. Meyer.
All right, so this legal standard adopting an ordinance is to council's idea of what is best for the community. You have the options of approving or denying or continuing. If you do continue, keep in mind that state requires a budget to be completed by the second meeting, and so does our charter, so I would recommend action tonight.
Can we go to executive session?
I was just going to ask the same thing.
Don't push me.
How about legal advice?
Yeah.
I would offer or ask for a resolution to accept the.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution approving second and final reading of ordinance number 1186, adopting the 2017 budget, setting the mill levy, and appropriating monies to the various funds within the city of Fort Morgan, and authorization to publish by title only.
Second.
I have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Christine Casteau. Vote by roll call.
That motion carries unanimously.
And we are done with the budget.
Excuse me, that resolution carries unanimously. Thank you, John.
There we go. Next, we have public comment or audience participation. Oh? No? Okay. Reports by officials or staff. Keep it brief, Mr. Wells.
I don't really have any report. I don't know if any of the other directors do. It looks like Josh does. Maybe it's an updated Cubs score, but
7-2 Cubs. Real quick, I just got a notification late today. Brian Mack had submitted an artifact in a statewide contest, and we've been selected as a finalist. So I'll work with Brennan to see if I can't get the link out to you guys for it's a vote now for those final artifacts statewide, and the winner takes the prize, and we hope that's us. It's an 1866 wedding proposal letter from a soldier. To a female he met, I'm assuming at a bar, but before she caught the train.
You had to take the away, didn't you?
Before she caught the train back to Denver. Brian has the whole history on it. It's quite fascinating. She unfortunately did say no, but there's some other history
Your
there as
story
well,
is
but-
going downhill fast, man.
The story itself's not exciting. The fact that we have an artifact in our collection that's from 1866 is pretty rare. So that alone is probably what's got us to where we are today. But
We should share the
if you want
link.
to see the letter, I have it and can send it via PDF. Not the letter itself, that stays in a safe place. But
We should share the link on social media to get community members to vote for it.
And
we just learned that this afternoon. It's going to be a public press release tomorrow, and then vote.
Jenny
Very
will
good.
make sure we get people to vote for it.
Any other reports?
if nobody else has anything, I feel obligated to say what I think Jeff would say if he was here. It's always exciting to finalize the budget and adopt the budget ordinance, and I'm sure he would thank all the directors and members of the city staff from top to bottom who participated in compiling and reviewing, and also the council for its involvement and engagement and support throughout this long process. We think it works great, and I think we've done it again.
We have.
Very well.
Take
well
a couple
said, Mr.
months
Wells.
off because it's going to start again soon.
That's right.
He fills in for Mr. Wells well.
Tomorrow.
You know, I think we were at a CML meeting just recently, and one of the other city people made the comment that when Jeff had said that we were about done with the budget, they made the comment that, probably a day or two before we'll just get together and spend several hours throwing something together. And I think it says a lot about the city of Fort Morgan and the great devotion of the directors and our city manager and everybody who's involved in the process to work on the budget in such a way that we're able to have a full understanding of it and not rushing and cramming right at the end. So thank you, everyone.
Well said.
Bids, meetings, and announcements. Mr. B.
Your Honor, if I could interject. Speaking of social media, it's been pretty hot tonight. It was talking about the fill-ins and what a commendable job y'all have done. I mean, I can't imagine, Mr. Boyer, you could do as good a job as John, but you did a fantastic job. And John, word is you're pretty hot right now on social media right now, filling in for Jeff. So just you're trending. I mean, let's just,
Hashtag John Brennan.
I hope Jeff's watching, by the way.
You've been tweetered.
Tweetered.
So, Mr. B, it's all yours.
All right, there are no bids currently open in the city. As far as the calendar, on November 9th, 12 in the afternoon, there's an airport advisory board meeting at the Fort Morgan Municipal Airport. On November 11th, all city offices will be closed in observance of Veterans Day, which is the following day. On November 14th, there's a Senior Center Advisory Board meeting at the Senior Center at 1 o'clock. Also on the 14th at 4:30 p.m., there is a Planning Commission meeting at City Hall. And then our next regular City Council meeting will take place here at City Hall at 6 p.m. on November 15th. And then as far as two announcements, just referring to the news release put out by John regarding our annual leaf pickup program that kicked off on October 29th. It will run through November 26th, and the street department is working to get those leaves picked up. And then we are still accepting applications for several openings on city advisory boards. There's several vacancies, either currently in place or expected to occur by the end of 2016. If you are interested, positions are expected to be available on the Airport Advisory Board, the Golf Advisory Board, the Library Advisory Board, and the Senior Center Advisory Board. And if you are interested, please submit an application. Some of those boards don't require that you live within the city limits. So if you have more questions about that, contact John Brennan in the city clerk's office. And that's it.
Okay. Next is an executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategies for negotiations, or instructing negotiators under CRS Section 24-6-402 4E, and for following additional details are provided for identification purposes for development incentives. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Your Honor, I would offer a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
We have a motion by Christine Costeau, a second by Dan Marlar. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We will adjourn to executive session.